Right, morning. Welcome everybody. Today, I think, more or less, is Tuesday, the 19th of January. Totally losing track of time again. Just sitting in front of these computers, as Trevor is saying. You not sure whether you're Arthur or Martha or Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day it is. And on that note, I've completely forgotten what our topic was all about this morning, Lisa. I'm going to have to hand it straight over to you to get us going.
Thanks, Ivan. So it came from Edward, and so maybe he should be the person, but it was really about what norms. This is how I phrased it, and I'm not sure it's exactly what Edward had in mind, but so what norms do we accept as that's just the way things are, that if we looked at it differently, they would seem ridiculous or unsustainable, whatever the case may be. And it started from for Trevor and Jasper's perspective, or it started talking about the alcohol industry, and that due to lockdown in South Africa, there are hundreds of thousands of people out of work because of the shutdown of the alcohol industry. And Edward was saying, well, why would we tolerate an industry that affects people's health and relationships and causes trauma all over the place? And so it was about questioning what we take for granted. And I did what Trevor does, and I went back to the past. And I thought, what are the things that have been accepted as the norm that have changed? And I think, so seeing as I've looked at it from the perspective of women and women's place and where we have been allowed to be or not allowed to be, that was the norm. That was accepted, that this is women where, what we're supposed to wear, what we're supposed to say, what our role is, and the, that the world was actually going to fall apart if women got the vote. And that they had to fight tooth and nail, literally, to be allowed to vote. And then this idea of a woman's place is in the home, which was not the norm prior to, well, in certain strata, that it was a construct of the 1950s to get women out of the workplace so that the men who had been at war would be able to come back and have work. And so it was a design. It wasn't a cultural norm at all. It was a plot, and we fell for it. And then so those are just some examples of how those were norms, and those have been challenged, and things have changed. So those are just my thoughts to get started. So Ivan, back to you.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, now you can get back in your place, and just please stay there, and don't disrupt the don't disrupt the course of things again. You just got to know your position in life. So I'm sure that'll get Ed's antenna sparking. So Ed, we better get across to you next.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating twist on the subject, because my point was that if we came up with a new product today and said it caused people to fall over, to have kidney disease, to beat their wives, to become addicted, to have motor accidents, we wouldn't license it. And what else would there happen to? And I think Lee's really right. There are social norms which we have overcome, aren't we? Because the class system in the UK is gradually disappearing, but it's hanging on like hell. And I think also keeping women in their place is also quite slow in disappearing, because yesterday I went to a fantastic Instagram course, because Instagram's something I struggle with. And the presenters of someone I know, and she's a very powerful, very knowledgeable, very respectful, very, very, you know, I just think she's really good at her job. But when she goes into meetings with her colleague who's male, everyone assumes the male's the boss. So we've still a long way to come. But the example I thought about was looking at things that, you know, when alcohol came along, we didn't really realize the downside of it until it became part of our society and therefore difficult to extract ourselves from. When cigarettes came along, we didn't know the downside of it, and it's very difficult to extract ourselves from. And I wonder what else we're in that situation with, and perhaps things like social media, you know, because social media has some great benefits, but it also has some downsides. You know, just think about Trump and Twitter. Think about people that get bullied by social media. Think about people that kind of slavishly follow Instagram influencers. You know, people with what they call them, eating disorders. The disorders get worse because they're kind of following what people do. There's even websites that encourage suicide. So there's the dark side to the good stuff of social media. But the thing I think that we've accepted the most without really questioning it, and it's probably very similar to Lee's point about how women are treated and women's role in society, is the capitalist economy. Because it's something we all accept. It's something that drives our lives, and we don't really necessarily look at the downsides of it. And I think you can look at it in two ways. You know, I know some people think of people like Elon Musk, and who's the guy that owns Amazon and that sort of stuff. You know, their huge wealth has been a good thing because we've all benefited from their huge wealth. But if you analyze it, what we've seen in the old days of the capitalist system, the owners of capital used to employ labor to create their wealth, and that employment of labor benefited the whole of society. And very many firms, for example, maybe Cadbury's, the big chocolate people, were more interested in helping society than creating huge profits. Now we've got the situation where capital employs very little labor and accumulates huge amounts of wealth without employing people, without distributing that wealth throughout the system. So perhaps it's our capitalist system, if we looked at it again from a different angle, would build something different. And then within that, we've got other things, you know, like very similar to cigarettes in a way, I suppose, that are addictive. And we can't extract ourselves away from that addiction. And we don't want to, because we still allow people to make cigarettes. We still allow people to sell cigarettes. And there are other addictions, like after the war, to try and help the farmers in America, they started using high fructose corn syrup in food products, which kind of led to the sort of boom in obesity, some think, but it did lead to sweet foods and also sweet and fatty foods, which are addictive. There's nothing more addictive than a chocolate hobnob, which led to an obesity boom. So cheap food had a good thing, it helped the farmers, but now we're stuck in this system of cheap addictive food that's causing the obesity crisis. And it's probably not as bad in South Africa as it is in the UK and America, but now we've got COVID here. Obese people are much more likely to die or be hospitalized than people of a normal weight. But we can't get out of it. We're stuck in that thing. So we wouldn't have looked at it. So those are just my sort of ramblings. I find it very hard to nail this one down. I think Lee did it beautifully with her example about women. And there are other things where the norm is accepted and dealt with, and we need to change it, and we can't change it. You know, I think it's 50 years ago since equality legislation was introduced in the UK, and still we have low wages for women, we have poor outcomes for women. So it's very hard to change some of these norms. And that's me finished, I think.
Great, thanks, Ed. So I think we better get across to Trevor next.
Oh, for goodness sake. Alcohol. Let's just think about that one. My wife and I, we have this constant debate as to whether it's a good thing that alcohol is effectively banned at the moment and affects all of these people who built their livelihoods around it. And why is it that a couple of people that have a little drink once a night should be affected the same as those that actually abuse what is available? So it's and I think she's onto it. It's about abuse. How do you stop abuse? Because it's not those people who are the vast majority that actually just meander along a line of not abusing a substance, for instance. And, you know, Ed talked of cigarettes, he talked of alcohol, he talked of, I mean, all the evidence is around there. If you abuse all of these substances, just like in the turn of the previous century, geez, I can't remember, how many centuries have we been through now? Cocaine was the export medium for Great Britain. That's why Ed is like what he is today, because they enjoyed the fruits of the spice trade, and the spiciest of all, poppies and cocaine. You can see once a year they celebrate that cocaine market with the poppy on the. No, that's probably not what they've got. I'm misinformed. Ed, you can inform me correctly, but it's about abuse and people getting addicted to particular substances and that sort of thing. But then there are medicinal components to this. And I think we're going through the same argument now with this marijuana industry. I mean, I wouldn't allow anyone in my family to touch marijuana because I was close to it. I saw it in our army days and in our young days, and how it affected guys and their minds, and people who abused this actually went crazy. People don't understand how addictive this stuff is. And I suppose being someone that actually has monitored price movements, where if you're working through a stochastic type principle as to how society really just meanders on either side of a trend line. And you can see that markets tend to move to a highly overbought territory, then they drop through the trend line to a highly oversold territory. In fact, Bitcoin right now is doing that. I mean, nothing changes. The more things change, the more that nothing changes. Just watching what is going on with things like Bitcoin. And then I'm just thinking, I don't know what this topic was today, because my candle didn't allow me to actually boot up my laptop. And now I've got a problem because, as I said, the wax is stuck in the blooming socket. I thought I could stick the candle in there. I've really got problems with how I'm hooked onto electrical power to actually boot up my life at the moment while I'm working remotely from home. So what was the topic? Bring me back on track, Ivan.
Oh, the products and things that had we known their effect on human beings when they were introduced, would we have allowed them to be introduced? In a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's why I retreat to my dream island regularly, because what sort of rules would you build up on your dream island? Um, so, would you allow the marula tree or the coconuts to actually ferment a little while and sup on the juice of it, because you're not going to get puchayed on a daily basis, or you just enjoy having a little tipple? Versus the individual who wants to drink every bit of juice out of that marula tree and goes off to Baragwanath Hospital like a drunk elephant and wipes out 1,000 people in various taxis because they hitting each other head on drunk. And I'm not having a go at the taxis. I'm having a go at people who drive drunk and under the influence. And I know what I wanted to touch on. This is why I was rambling on. Lee said she's like Trevor, goes back in history. Lee, you know nothing. Let me tell you, I have got so involved in history to try and work out what the hell is going on in our DNA right now. And really what I'm discovering is as we go back in time, and I think I went back to, is it Shah Bishar, I think is the Bishar, an original Shah of Iran, they had built this fantastic empire in Iran. And then Genghis Khan came across, and he decided, no, he was going to take out all these super intelligent people. And what they had built up here in Persia was incredible. And Genghis Khan attacked their city, and I can't remember the name of it, not the brightest boy in town. But it took them a good couple of days to actually take out the city, and they chased 1 million people out of the city into the plains. And then Genghis Khan turned around and said, okay, my order is that each and every single one of you, his people, must go out there and kill 400 people in that plain. And that's what they did. They went out over the next week and they slaughtered 1 million people. How horrifying is that? But as you were talking of the introduction and women, someone was talking about women coming to power. And I thought, you know what, from the turn of that 20th century, the moment that women got the vote, we went into the First World War, the Second World War. We went into the slaughter of people all the way leading up to Syria and all of that sort of. Does that go back to the woman getting the vote or whatever? No, it doesn't. So just in case we misconstrue the facts, the real point that I want to make is there's something inherent in us as individuals that almost bow down to leaders that allow us to go out and annihilate people without even thinking about it. Because things haven't changed. If you thought that Genghis Khan and what he did was blooming murderous, well, what the hell happened in Syria? And what the hell happened at the turn of next door to Iran, Iraq? In the 1990s, and how many hundreds of thousands of people have been killed because of stupidity of leaders, and go back to the Palestinians and the Israelites and the First and Second World War, and there are people who still deny that 6 million people were killed in that war. And what about the Houthis or the Hutus and the millions that have been killed in Africa? We don't learn. And this goes back to me for the events of last week at the state capital. These people in a heartbeat would go out there, and I'm telling you, there would be slaughtering happen. And it was a miracle that no slaughtering happened in America last week. And I think there's something amiss in our wiring here that says we must just go out there and slaughter people. So I'm trying to work out, who of you should I leave?
I think there's something amiss in your wiring, Trevor, because you've missed the topic completely. So
what was the topic?
Yeah, I've lost it.
You said I could come here and ramble on and do anything. You know what? To get it back, there was a simple saying that said, adapt or die. And I think that's how we are made up. We adapt to what's going on in society. Some people push the bounds, some don't. And that's about moving up and down, above and below the stochastic line or trend line.
Right, so I'm not too sure about stochastic or sarcastic or whatever it might be, but certainly they were lines. We spoke about lines yesterday, but yeah, I think we've crossed a few of them this morning. So Jasper, can you collect these lines and tie some knots on the ends and bring them back together or not?
Morning. I have a short answer is no. I was trying to, I thought I just had maybe a bit of a thread of the topic after Lee and Edward, and then like you rightly said, although it was entertaining, I lost my thought completely there during Trevor. But I think what came out for me, if we just focus on the word norms, which is a derivative of, say, what is considered normal, and it probably refers to social behavior. I think we never had anything that was ever normal. And when I say normal, what was ever universally accepted? So maybe the structure of a family that was universally accepted, and maybe the role of parents to a child to an extent, and the fact that parents for a large part of the child's upbringing is seen as his nurturing environment and protector and provider and stuff like that. But for the rest, in terms of social behavior, I think it was never a universal thing. It was more like a social thing. And even in the same country, you would have social norms that would apply in a coastal town that would not apply, let's say, inland. But I think there's certainly something afoot. And norms are changing. And like Lee has pointed out, in terms of the role of women in society, for me, a worrying factor is how the voice of the minority, but amplified through the media, and using all the psychological techniques to make you feel guilty, they have become the norm. So what is right now in the world is not really, I believe, the voice of the majority. It's really the voice of the minority amplified through selected media and politicians. Same-sex marriage. I mean, I love the music of what's that lady from Canada? She sang that Titanic thing. Celine Dion, yeah. But she lost a few marbles. And she's now coming out with what you call it, neutral genders, with neutral gender clothing. But if you look at her, she's on some sort of I don't know what diet or so, but she looks awful. Still sing beautifully, but I'm just worried about the influence of these kind of people who lost their marbles in terms of a boy can't be a boy and a girl can't be a girl, because you have to allow them nurture neutral environment until they make up their mind who they are. So I think for me, and in schooling, I think I grew up in an era where there was still respect for a teacher. Nowadays, it's a highly dangerous job to be a teacher, or it used to be. I think we're going back to my brother's wife, just finished her degree in teaching. And he said that although they go back to school and sit in a physical classroom, most of those students are not attending the classroom, they're attending Zoom. So all of this is done by Zoom. So what will it be the new normal behavior coming out of this? So I think, again, my safety mechanism is not to come up with solutions, but try and define the problem. And I think I define the problem is that the level of uncertainty has increased and is rapidly increasing to a level of panic. So where I would, as a parent, still train my child according to certain behavior that I believe would equip him to survive out there in the social structures out there. What do I train him on today? Because those norms, I don't know the norms. And as you test the norms, it changes. So I think that uncertainty as to what is supposed to be the norm, the majority of people then just go quiet. So the big masses are now what I call this almost masses of quiet desperation, but they don't voice their opinions because they are scared to be ostracized and be made the laughing stock of the media or these minority. And it, for me, comes right back to what I'm busy working on through GIG and all the other stuff. And that is, guys, we need an absolute truth. We need an absolute plumb line. Imagine if we try to build buildings, and some of that does happen, when people don't follow the science of building, where they don't look at the angles and the strength and the foundations and all of these things. You can build very basic structures and squatter camps, but you certainly can't build high-rise buildings if you don't follow the exact science to the T. So I think that's true for society as well. And I think the majority of us are too scared now. We've been bullied into silence to say, listen, guys, we need an absolute truth. And this is the truth I'm standing for. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Jasper. You know, we really got to see if we can turn you around to come up with an occasional solution. You know, I mean, all these questions that you're posing, you know, just creating more confusion. Yeah, I think for me, it is interesting because I agree. I think there's certain fundamentals that'll never change, despite how much people might want them to change. Like you say, you know, if you try and build a high-rise building and break all the rules of construction, you know, the chances are it's going to fall down at some point in time, if it even gets up to the height that you planned it to. So there are certain things that'll always hold true. You know, and I don't think men are ever going to have babies, for example. So, but I might be wrong. You know, who knows? So, you know, if you grow up neutral, you know, things might change. But I think it's relatively unlikely. But yeah, you know, I think Ed's point about social media actually, you know, really makes an interesting one for me, because if you're going to look at social media, then you've got to look at Hollywood, for example, the whole movie and soapy type industry and the power that has in terms of influencing the thinking of the masses that actually watch these things. And if you look at the trends over the last 50 years of how the you know, how the nature of these programs have actually changed, and the way they've started to push different roles within the medium that they provide, and emphasize certain roles and the changes of roles. I think it's been an incredibly powerful medium to influence the masses and influence the way society operates and thinks. And I think it's been a lot more subtle and insidious than even social media has been. So, yeah, if you'd known 50, 60, 70 years ago when television was invented, that it would have such power over the mindsets of people, would we have allowed television to actually happen? You know, I don't know. So I think, you know, you can look at all of these things and say there's a good and a bad side. And I think, you know, Trevor's point of, you know, is it the tool that's evil, or is it the way the tool is used that makes it evil? And that comes back to quite simply, you know, again, as Trevor said, you know, do we as humans actually ever really learn anything, or do we just keep on repeating the same old mistakes that we've made for the last couple of thousand years, maybe just with using a different tool, you know. So Genghis Khan might have used a sword and a spear, you know. Today we using atom bombs and submachine guns and all sorts of other weird and wonderful things. So, you know, the tools have changed, but have the actions actually changed? Have we learned anything from those horrendous things that happened in the past? And yeah, you know, I mean, Ria and I were chatting about, you know, these things that have happened and are happening in the States. And I mean, you know, everybody sits here in South Africa and says, you know, when we have protests and people vandalize things and burn them and loot things, you know, it's terrible, and how can it be allowed? Well, guess what? Exactly the same thing's happening in America. It's happening everywhere around the world. You know, people are being allowed to take these protests into a form that is destructive and illegal and violates the rights of the people who don't want to be part of that insurrection, if I can call it that. So yeah, have we learned? Are we going to learn? That's I think the real question for me. So I think on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Lee and see where we're going to go from here.
Well, and we can go down that route of thinking about, you know, what do we learn, what can we learn from the past, and maybe that would be a good discussion. The other one that's holding sort of a place in my mind is who has the power, the consumer, the individual, the voter, you know, me, myself in my little place, or big organizations, big government. You know, Jasper's spoken about the greater centralization of power. So are we basically at the mercy of these trends, big businesses, or do we have some power that we can exert to change things in the way that better serve us and not just the interests of those in power? So vote. Learning about the past, talking about power.
I'll vote for learning from the past.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, seeing that Trevor's been in an in-depth study in the past and the recent history, we better take that route, I think, and see, can we learn? Do we learn? Have we learned? So go forth and learn, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Have a good one, folks.